Hello, welcome to Miniature Realms. My name's Stuart. Have you got a tank that's overcompensating? Well, let's show you how to paint it.
Miniature Realms is proudly sponsored by Counter-Attack Bases. They stock a wide range of counters, gaming aids and movement trays for multiple game systems, and offer custom items to suit your club, your event, or even your podcast or YouTube channel. Check out the link in the video description.
Behind the scenes at Miniature Realms Towers, I've been making a start to building my Heresy army. I say making a start. I've built this in addition to the Praetor. It's primed black. The weapons come off the hatch in case I want to change it to one with a weapon later on, and then this little sort of gun guard here as well, because I'm going to make that checker plating. It makes it a little bit easier if I do these minor sub-assemblies. I'll try to do as few as possible. Starting here with 2 layers of black. I've got Death Reaper and Dungeon Stone Grey. With the airbrush, I've turned this piece upside down. I'm working with the angle of the miniature, and I'm just highlighting one side of the panel, and then I turn the angle over so the overspray doesn't catch the other part, and you end up with this transition from grey to black on each of those panels. Following up the same method on a few other parts that are going to be black, so just these sort of shields here on both of the las cannons at the sides, and then you've got a couple of inset armor panels also on the side, and I'm going to mask these off before I do all the metallic work afterwards, because I'm painting this as Iron Warriors. With that lighter shade of grey, I'm focusing even more towards the edge of those panels, so you've got that transition all the way through to the darker black, and it will look great once all the silver works around it, believe me. Before I can start spraying all of that metallic, I need to mask off, and I've got some masking fluid and some masking tape here for the hazard patterns. I used to use masking tape for these areas as well and cut up lots of different small parts. I prefer to use masking fluid if I can. It's just easier to paint it in and quicker to peel it off again afterwards. I've used a few different brands now. This is the AK1, which works almost exactly the same as the Vallejo one I used to use. One thing I have learned over the years is to use these rubber clay shapers to paint it in. If you pick the ones with a nice point on the end, you've got quite a bit of control. It just saves you from ruining brushes. Even if they're old brushes, you can not really wash all of that out again, and you just almost have to throw it away straight away. Whereas this, you can wait for it to dry and just pull it off the end, and you're as good as golden to start again. I use an awful lot of different sizes and widths of masking tape. I can't remember what size this is exactly. I think this is centimetre, 10mm, so I don't know what that is in Imperial, but there's a really simple way of doing the hazard stripes here. It's basically to cover the whole part, just building them up next to each other to make sure that you've got even spaces with your lines. If you can just try and guesstimate it and stick the next one over a little bit further, that's fine as well. But this is just a lot safer way of making sure all those lines stay fairly consistent. You do waste a little bit more tape doing it this way, but I think it's worth it, and it definitely saves a lot of time. And once you've covered the whole thing, you just peel off every other stripe, and you've got the areas that the paint is going to go on for the next layer. This is Dark Sun Yellow, Skulker Yellow and Yellow Fame. These are all from Two Thin Coats. They compare very, very well with Citadel. I've said this in many videos before, but if you go to the Transatlantic Games website, you'll find really useful conversion charts over to Citadel, and the Citadel yellows are excellent as well. Some really good ranges there. So if you're a Citadel user, you will find paints that match these almost exactly. I'm going in a little bit light to start with, just building up the intensity towards the middle of each stripe rather than on the bottom of the whole armor plate like I did with the grey. So a slightly different style here. I want to build the intensity and the brightness towards the middle, making my lines a little bit thinner each time as I move between those 3 yellows. It means that my last yellow is a little bit brighter just in the middle. Just gives a nice little effect. It's very subtle. It's not really sort of overpowering or anything like that, but it just gives a nice effect in those hazard stripes. And then we're back to peeling again and to see whether there's any bleed through, and there is a little bit on this as I expected. The miniature isn't flat here. There's a few little bits of detail, which means it's impossible to get your masking tape 100% flat, but there's nothing too bad and nothing that can't be very, very easily touched up with a little bit of black paint afterwards. And you're going to weather this and add chipping and things, and you can hide a multiple of minor sins like this with a bit of weathering. This is dark bronze from Pro Acryl, but basically I'm looking for any sort of brownish, bronzish metallic, and I love using this underneath all my metals. It works well under gold because of the warm tones, but it works really well under steel colours as well. It just gives a really nice undertone, which gives the metal a little bit of a deeper feel, adds some sort of texture. I know there's no actual texture there, but once you start applying other layers on top of it, you can just see it showing through ever so slightly in the crevices, in the deep cracks and things, and it just gives a little bit more realism, at least in my opinion anyway. Then following up with dark silver, also from Pro Acryl here. This is just a really dark gunmetal colour, and I'm being very light with my passes on it here. A light pass over first on the tracks, but then I do go over the rest of the miniature, and the plan here is to try and leave some of that brownish metallic colour showing through to add that effect, and I think I've just about achieved that here. I don't want to go so heavy that I completely cover everything, so I've even got some of the black showing through there as well, because I gave quite a light coat. It just builds it up slowly, adding to the idea of light there, helps you with the idea of depth on the miniature as well, and I think it really helps the final effect. Another Pro Acryl colour, this is steel. I'm really enjoying their metallics. They're very smooth and work great with the brush and through the airbrush, and that's really what I look for with a lot of my paints and definitely my metallics. And I tend to be moving over towards these a little bit more now. I can't get readily enough the scale 75 metal and alchemy range quite as much as I'd like to, as and when I need it, which is a bit of a shame. So these I'm starting to try and replace those colours, but these are very, very good. They've got a very small range at the moment. If you're looking to check them out, they've got one metal set, one metallic set, and then 2 or 3 individual paints that you can add afterwards. I hope they expand it more, but you can see what I'm doing here. I'm starting to build up the lighter colours towards the bottom of the armour panel, but not to the top. This is deliberate. This is not necessarily where the light would hit. It's a stylistic thing, but it's something I really like to do with my tanks. When I go to the top, I'm just going as if the light was hitting down directly on the top of the tank, and I try to focus in the middle of the armour panels, leaving that brown, leaving those darker colours around the recesses and in the gaps around each of the sort of sections of armour. And yes, Pro Acryl, again, this is silver. This is the brightest silver they do. It feels like it's got a little bit of white in the pigment here. If you really want extra boost or extra shine, sometimes I'll go to a different colour. The Vallejo Game Air Silver is great. I've been playing around with the Mithril from Army Painter at the moment as well, and that works quite well. But through the airbrush like this is absolutely fine. I'm just continuing what I've been doing already, focusing further and further towards the bottom of the tank. If you don't like that stylistic thing, you can copy this, but just do it the other way up and have the darker bit down the bottom. I'm still going to weather the bottom of the tank, but hopefully it makes sense when you see the finished miniature why I've gone for it in that way. But I'm just building up that brighter area here, and then I will continue to build up towards the center of these panels and areas on the top, again leaving all those previous shades showing through, so you got this sort of nice gradual from black to brown to the dark silver gunmetal up to these brighter areas, giving you the idea of real depth in that metal and shine where the light might be reflecting off. So now to contrast, we have Nazdrag Yellow, Blood Angels Red, and Leviathan Purple. I'm going to be using these through the airbrush, so a little touch of thinner, and I'm going to be using them for Heat Bloom, and they're my go-to 3 colours for an easy way of doing it. I've tried it with lots of different paints from different ranges, lots of different ways of doing it. Just using a little bit of paper here, a little bit of basic masking to stop the overspray going on other parts, but I've gone through yellow first, let it blend into the end of the weapon, and then slowly add a little bit of red at this stage, and then same again, using a little bit of paper for some masking there as well. And then before we know, we're on to the purple colour, and I'm just adding that again further down the barrel towards the tip, and it goes quite dark when you're covering over that red as well. You get this really nice transition through those 3 colours, and it's really simple with the airbrush. You can do it without the airbrush. You have to take a lot of time building up those layers. You can dry brush them on sometimes as well, but it's definitely trickier. This is Rattling Grime. It's a contrast colour I very rarely use, but it's perfect for this. It's very thin in pigment, almost wash-like. I'm just using it to add a little bit of shadow and shade in certain areas, and it's got a sort of blacky, browny effect, and it's really handy at adding a little bit of dirt into the grills, a bit of sort of carbon build up on where the engine soot, etc., but also adding some shading around where the exhaust would kick out carbon as well. I'm also using it to shade a little around the edges of the tracks, a little bit down the centre of the track to add a little bit of variation as well. And you can just get it in there with the airbrush, so it makes it look like the metal's a little bit just coloured around the edges, so you're not worried about the odd millimetre or two of overspray. In fact, it adds to the effect as well. And then the same around the bottom. So I'm just adding slightly different tones and definitions in different areas of the metal, just using a thin coat of this contrast paint through the airbrush. And this is the tank so far with all the main airbrushing layers down. Now it's time to start adding some transfers or decals, depending on what you want to call them, but we've got to remove the masking first before we can do that. So we've got a little bit of masking around the sort of gun emplacements and on the sides of the tank, covering those black areas that I didn't want to get a metallic paint over. So there's always a moment of truth when you're peeling away your masking, hoping that you don't remove paint, which sometimes happens, especially in the days when these were always resin and you wash and wash and wash all the release agent off, but you go to take some paint off like this and a big chunk comes off, and it was very, very depressing. Much better these days, but I don't have any issues here at all. I'm using a little rolled up ball of the masking that I've already pulled off, and you slowly make that ball bigger and bigger, but it's a really handy way of getting it started, and it just pulls away really easily, as you can see there. Time for some gloss varnish now. This is new Kaleido stuff I've reviewed very recently. It's pretty good. It's up there with the decent varnishes that I use. I had no issues with it throughout this project, so I thought I'd give it a proper go rather than just the test I did for a review the other day. If you're interested in it, there's a link in the video description and you get 10% off if you use that link. But use your favourite gloss varnish if you're already a user through the airbrush, but this stuff is great, and I didn't even need to thin it, which is quite often a good thing with airbrush varnishes. So I'm giving a good coat over most of the miniature here because I want my transfers, my decals to fit really well. I also want to add some protection before I add oil washes later on. And here we come to that adding transfers part. I'm not going to go into any detail here. I've got microset and microsol, and I got my decals and my transfers, and I'll try and remember now to put a link into a separate video where I show you how I apply decals. But essentially using those tools, you can do a really, really good job of it. But I don't want to extend the video by extra 5 minutes here by really going into great detail. You can go and watch that if you want to know how I do them. While I'm waiting for those decals, those transfers to dry before I can add a second layer of varnish on them, protect them before all the weathering, I'm using my time doing something else, and this is a sort of a coppery iron colour from the Army Painter. First time I tried it, it seems absolutely fine. Just picked it up on impulse the other day. Definitely trying a lot of metallics at the moment. I just wanted to add a little bit of colour interest to the miniature that wasn't the amount of sort of steel or iron colour that's everywhere. We've got a couple of areas of black. Of course, we've got the hazard stripes as well. But you've got these larger areas of metallics on the back, and there's plenty of areas you can pick out in a copper kind of colour, and that's what I'm doing here. A little bit of detailing on the gun, some of the copper piping, and just a few other little details here and there, and it works quite well. It just sort of breaks it up a little bit, adds a little bit of detail, makes it look a little bit more defined in certain areas. And this is Pro Acryl Copper, and I'm just going to use this as the highlight for that previous Army Painter colour as well. Now this paint doesn't quite blend quite the same way as the scale colour, the scale 75 Metal and Alchemy, so I just ended up wet blending these with the previous colour, which I still had on the palette at the time, and that worked just fine. I probably could have dry brushed it as well, but I'm really just picking on sort of the edge here, the apex of the little stripes here at the side. Then it is time to add those varnishes. I've got gloss and matte here to want to paint the black areas and the hazard stripe area in matte, but I want gloss everywhere else. Protect all of those decals that I've put on, and also protect it from the weathering that's going to happen in a moment. And this is a little bit of mithril silver, and this is the first stage of the weathering, and I'm just dry brushing it here all over the tracks first. And I've got a flat-ended brush here. I think it's a tank brush from Citadel, but I use it for dry brushing when I want to catch the edge of something, and that's exactly what I'm going to be doing over a lot of this miniature here. So around the edges of all the tracks, but also the edges of the armor panels as well. It just adds a little bit more definition, works a little bit like an edge highlight does, but in a slightly more realistic looking way. Just makes it look like the light is catching, gives you definition, makes it pop and stand out a little bit more, and just overall is a pretty pleasing effect. But it also acts a little bit like weathering as well. As you start dry brushing over the sharper edges on things like the hash marked area, it just looks like the paint has worn away a little bit there as well, which is also a really, really nice effect. Then it's time to start the oil washes. This is a ready mixed oil wash from Scale Colour Soil Works, and I'm just getting lazy and I use these an awful lot. You can mix your own, and I may will show you in a separate video for you looking at raw or burnt umber, and then some Sansador, so Artist White Spirit, or some AK Thinner, something like that. Now I'm doing an all over oil wash here. You see me use oil washes before on videos. I tend to be a little bit more liberal with them, put them into the recesses like a pin wash or something like that. But with a metallic miniature like this, you can really do an all over oil wash, and this is a little bit akin to slapping Agrax Earthshade over a completed miniature, which I'm sure we've all done in the past and maybe still do. The difference here is because it's an oil wash, we're going to be taking most of this back on, so this sort of slapdash method won't leave you with a messy looking miniature at the end, or at least deliberately messy because it's going to be weathered. But it's fun slapping it all over. It can get quite messy. I'm using old brushes here to put it on it, but it doesn't take too long. Before we know it, we've fully covered the whole miniature. Now it's time to take it off, and we have some AK fast dry thinners here, and I have some sponges. But first of all, I'm just going to start with just a soft sponge. I'm going around removing it from the miniature. Now I've waited for this to go surface dry for a couple of hours. You can speed it up with a hairdryer if you like, but it really depends on your climate and how quickly it will dry. In the summer I can stick it in the garden, it dries almost too quick sometimes in the winter it takes ages. And to fully set, oil paints can take days to fully set, but you can control it a little bit. Now what I like is where it's quite tacky, where it's completely surface dry, but I can wipe it away like this without any thinner to start with, leaving it all in the recesses. What you don't want is it to be so wet that when you rub it away like this, you actually lose it from the recesses, because then you're taking too much back off and you've not waited long enough. It does sometimes take a little while to get used to it, and sometimes I still get it wrong, but this was about perfect today. As you can see, it's looking pretty grim and weathered already, but I really want to make it pop and stand out, and this is where those thinners come in. So a little bit in the cap, and I dip my sponge in, squeeze it off, I just want it damp, and I start wiping more away. And I tend to do it in the direction of travel of weather. So if it's been raining and the streaks run down, and that's what I'm trying to do. So any lines you get are in the right direction. When I go to the top of the tank, I tend to go in the direction of travel rather than straight down. And what you do, you still leave it in the recesses, but it just takes some of it almost back to the pure metallic again, making it really, really nice and shiny and stand out. To have even more control afterwards, you can use a cotton bud or a Q-tip, dip that in a little bit of the white spirit and draw lines down, and you can really control where those lines are as well. Now, some people will use little dots of oil paint, dab it on the brush or dab it on the tank, and then use a little white spirit to drag it down in dripping lines as well, and that works really well if you want to add extra in. This gives a similar effect by having it on there first and then wiping it away. And the beauty of this is this oil paint can be mostly washed off if you really, really wanted to. So I'm just going around, playing around with it, making sure I'm happy that there's not areas that look like there's been a bit of spilt paint, that I'm leaving it in the recesses, buffing and cleaning areas that I want to, but leaving enough on there to make it look grimy and dirty and weathered. And that's what we look like after pass number 2 with the thinner, and it's definitely a lot cleaner. All of that oil is down in the recesses, and we can go on to some finishing touches now. This is Dirty Downs Rust. Love this stuff. Now technically this ceramite plate probably wouldn't rust anyway, but we've got millions of different worlds that will have different atmospheres and different effects, and this is very much a rule of cool thing here. It's just a nice way of adding little extra details in, and there's loads of ways of adding rust. You can paint it in with regular acrylic paints, you can use oils yourself to do it, you can use enamels from places like AK. This stuff is just really versatile. It's water soluble, so you can thin it and blend it out a little bit. If you build it up by layers, you can get quite an intense colour, and you've just got a lot of control over it. So I can add a little bit around a rivet, draw a little line down, add a little bit of water to it and thin it out. But because it's water soluble, it wipes away quite easy to start with as well, especially from shiny surfaces like this. So just spend a little bit of time going round the tank, not adding it to every rivet, but just adding it in places and making the tank look like it's been on campaign a lot. And I'm going to be running Loyalist Iron Warriors and then maybe they've in a situation where they can't refit very often as well, so maybe their equipment will look a little bit more battered and weathered mid-heresy than some that are attached to their larger fleet and that they can sort of fix things up. So I quite like the idea of things being a little bit beaten up as well, but mostly I'm just doing it because I think it looks cool. Here's just a few more examples of how you can use this. Rather than sort of painting in little spots, you can just dab it in areas and sort of almost add slight staining and things to the metal, especially if you thinned it slightly. And also adding it here in patches to the middle of the tracks. And I'll just go back with a bit of water on my brush and just thin it all out and feather it all out, and it just sort of adds some coloration and changes there. So that sort of effect of the metal beginning to oxidize but maybe not got to that dry stage. This is Dark Earth pigment from AK. I'm just adding different textures now. I'm just in a few patches. I'm going for more of a wet mud effect for this army. I normally go for drier effects, but I thought I'd do something slightly different. But I still want to add some different textures where the mud that's maybe being stuck in the tracks for a while has become sort of dried in and encrusted in. So just in little patches, rubbing it in dry, blowing the excess off and just leaving it in the detail. I don't really want an awful lot there. It's fun to put in patches as well on the tracks. This AK stuff sticks really well. It's very greasy compared to some of the other brands that I've used. In fact, all the other brands that I've used. I'm not a makeup user, but it feels more like something that, because of the greasiness effect, feels a little bit more like my wife's makeup maybe than just a powder. Now I'm using some wet mud. This is a diorama effect from AK as well, and I'm dipping it on an old brush, and I'm just using an airbrush to basically spray air past it, which gives you this sort of flicker effect on the side of the tank as well. You can do this with blood effects and things as well. And then some Vallejo European mud, which I love this effect. It's really, really good for sort of adding some sort of flaky, dirty mud on there as well. So a completely different colour to the other mud, but building up layers gives you the idea of passing through different types of environment on the battlefield. Some will maybe be an oil mixed environment, maybe buildings broken up and you still got some earth there. This might be a slightly different kind of muddy field, but all in all, when you add all these different textures and colours, it just really adds to the idea of realism. And you can see in the bottom here how weathered the bottom of that hazard marked area looks. I just really, really like doing it. Still slightly tacky at this stage, but there we are, pretty much finished. I did realise at this stage, and for the pictures, I hadn't painted in the couple of little lights and lenses on there. I did that afterwards, but let's have a look at the proper pictures. Anyway, I love painting tanks, and I love painting Heresy tanks. There's something very liberating and I find quite easy about them. They're large surfaces, especially when I'm doing a metallic scheme like this, which I deliberately picked to make it more simple for me, that I can get an army on the table quicker with all the other painting commitments I have for the channel and for my own old world projects. That's partly why I've chosen Iron Warriors, but it's really fun to sort of show you how you can sort of explore metallics and weathering and things in a video like this as well. So I hope people have found that useful. There's nothing particularly new there in terms of techniques. I've been using very similar techniques on Heresy armies for nearly a decade now, or maybe a decade or so. But there are things there that people won't have seen, especially viewers of the channel, because I've not painted an awful lot of Heresy yet. Painted the odd 40k tank or something like that, so some of the stuff here you would have seen, but this really kind of showed it all in one place. And I don't think I've showed the all over oil wash thing before either. Now, as you can see how well it works on this, the way I think it works anyway, it's come out quite well. I'm quite happy with this, so you're gonna have to let me know what you think of it in the comments below. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed that. I really had loads of fun painting that. It's for my own army, and it's nice to do something like that as well that fits in with content on the channel. And I'm not going to be flooding the channel with Heresy stuff in place of all the old world stuff, but as I work on more Heresy, there will be a little bit more of it sneaking in as well, amongst the mix of all the other games that I do. So hopefully you enjoy it, and if you don't play Heresy, you should be able to pick up lots of painting tips anyway, which is really at the core of what a lot of the videos that I produce and what I'm trying to do on the channel. And if you have enjoyed it, please give it a like and drop a comment below. It really helps the channel be seen by other people, and subscribe if you haven't already done so, and check out that subscriptions page as well. I know my home screen is a mess these days. It's hardly any of the channels that I actually subscribe to, so I have to make sure that I go and click on that tab to make sure I don't miss out on all of the channels that I enjoy watching, because YouTube just wants to show us new things all the time, which is great but also not very helpful for us who are trying to get subscribers to keep coming back and view stuff on our channel. So please do check out those subscription pages of all those channels that you enjoy. If you'd like to support me even further, please do check out my Patreon. It is the very best way you can support me to continue to make videos like this, and I really appreciate all the help that I get from my patrons, and there's some cool perks on there as well if you are a patron, so check it out. But thank you very much for watching. Take care, and I'll catch you soon.